think this is our second. This is our second class on the book, and this is the chapter. This is chapter 4. The horn blew, and I began to wake up. So this is a. I thought this chapter was beautifully written because I think that, first of all, just that first line, I just want to read for everyone. This first piece, which is kind of framing for the whole paragraph, for the whole chapter, just because I think it sets it up so nicely. And I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Suddenly, you are awakened by a strange noise, a noise that fills the full field of your consciousness and then splits into several jagged strands, shattering that field, shaking you awake. The ram's horn, the shofar, the same instrument that will sound 100 times on Rosh Hashanah, the same sound that filled the world when the Torah was spoken into being on Mount Sinai, is being blown to call you to wakefulness, to awake to confusion. Where are you? Who are you? Then you remember, in exactly 1 month, 1 revolution of the moon, you will stand before God. What will God see on that day? What will you see? This encounter can carry you significantly closer to the truth of your life. Standing in the light of God, you can see a great deal more than you ordinarily might, but only to the degree that you are already awake, only in the proportion to the time and energy you have devoted to preparing for this encounter. So it is that the Matei Moshe proclaimed, every person must prepare himself for 30 days beforehand with repentance and prayer and charity for the day when he will appear in judgment before God on Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, let every person scrutinize their actions with a view to mending them. Let them exclude themselves for 1 hour every day and examine themselves. And Rabbi Chaim David Azulai declared, during Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, one should devote less time to study and more time to fixed periods of introspection and self-evaluation. And the Kav Hayasher recorded that many men in his time observed silence between the advent of Elul and Rosh Hashanah to effect the purification of their souls. The horn blows to usher in Elul, and it is blown every morning of the month of Elul as well, lest we forget and slip back, lest we surrender to the entropic pull of mindlessness. The Torah also stands ready to help keep us awake. As we move toward the month of Elul, we also move through the book of Deuteronomy. And each of the weekly Torah readings, Re'eh, Shoftim, Netzavim, and Kitete, whisper to us, wake up, wake up. Each of these readings offers a subtle rhyme to the process of awakening to which the month of Elul has called us. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and share that, first of all, when I read this, I can't help but thinking about an alarm clock that just because it wakes up once, doesn't mean that I'm personally awake and ready to go. Usually it takes a few times of the snooze button. And I feel that the continuous blast of the shofar every morning of Elul is supposed to be that, don't slip back, don't go fall back asleep. You're supposed to stay awake at this point. And we have the blast every day for that exact reason. And I think that it's an interesting, this line specifically saying that standing in the light of God, you can see a great deal more than you ordinarily might, but only to the degree that you are already awake. It's the rest of this chapter is going to be about how can we continue to wake ourselves up? It's one thing to just say, okay, we're awake, we're ready, we're here, but there's actually a lot more work to be done. And I also thought it was interesting that he said, one of them said to study less. This is Rabbi Chaim David Azulai, to devote less time to study in this month and more time to introspection. I thought that was a fabulous line because it's really kind of goes against what you might think a rabbi might tell you to do. So those are my initial thoughts on just that first opening that kind of sets the frame for the and the tone for the chapter and for this class. So I'm curious to hear if anyone here had any thoughts about this opening.
I did. As soon as I read that line about, this is really the first thing you need to do is just set this time aside to do, not worry about the classes or anything else. I said, wow, I've been not wasting time, but I need to go back and really do this. And it's hard work. It's hard work. Because immediately you start thinking, well, what is there all about me? And, what do I need to improve on? And, and it's heavy duty. I never realized that you just spend as much time as you can making this the priority in this whole month.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you for sharing. That's great.
A little anecdote. So my older daughter, Jess, is very much into this. Our whole family is reading the book, which is really great. My older daughter, Jess, is teaching at Temple Beth Am Jewish Day School, and she's co-teaching the Jewish Studies program, and they're trying to get the students all focused on Elul. So she also has to get up early now that school started. So I've been calling her in the morning, and every morning we play the Temple Beth Shalom Shofar Blast that you're all in. And it's really amazing. We've been doing it ever since Elul started, and you did that beautiful, I hope everybody's seen it. But it's Craig, do you have that? Or it's really great because it's animated, and all the rabbis, Rabbi Loiben's part of it, and Rabbi Davis is standing on top of the synagogue.
Yeah.
Was this distributed? Was this distributed?
It gets us going, and then we share a quote. We were trying to read through, and we share a quote that's meaningful to us. And, so I like the part of the chapter that says, just try to do something. Don't overwhelm yourself. But in the process of doing that, and then we started talking about Psalm 27. And so these little things come up every day. Psalm 27 is this beautiful psalm that we're supposed to say during Elul. And I guess my experience doing it with somebody who's committed like I am is that it helps move it forward. It isn't miraculous every day. I don't want to overstate it, but just doing something is really a good thing.
So where would we see this blast?
I'll play it at the end of the class.
Okay, great.
It is very, very cute. We each got to choose where we wanted to blow the shofar in Miami. Of course, Rabbi Davis chose the roof of the synagogue. But everyone, we're in all different spots in Miami. It was a lot of fun. And it was like 105 degrees that day. So I think that's really important. And especially, Gail was saying, like, it sounds like a lot of hard work, and it absolutely is. But I think also what Mark said is important, and we'll get to that later, that it's really hard to have this sense of I have to do it all this month. And it's not only hard, it's unrealistic. It's impossible. And we're not actually meant to complete the work. But in the same, the saying from Pirkei Avot, which is actually about just like the work of the world. But really, in order to work on the world, you really need to work on yourself first, which is what this month is about. It says that you don't have to complete the work, but you're not free to desist from it. That even though it's enormous, you still have to just take that first bite. That is, you don't have to chomp down the whole thing. I don't know where this metaphor is going exactly, but the idea is just like to start bite by bite. And that, and to have bite-sized pieces can really be a little bit less overwhelming. So maybe choose one thing for the month that you're going to think about each day or each week, or whatever it is that you can get to work for you. Does anyone else have any thoughts about just the opening itself? Roger?
Well, I find it hard just to concentrate on one thing. There's so many things that I feel like I've done wrong or I have to work on over the year, and they just come at you. I mean, you can't control your thoughts. There's so many conflicting feelings and ideas at this time. I don't know really where to stop or where to end. So I just kind of let it flow, and I hope I get some kind of clarity. I'll leave it at that. Usually I don't. Usually I'm still befuddled, even at the end of Elul. But at least I'm trying. I'm considering all of the things that I have to work on, and I'm sure we all have our own thoughts and ideas of what we have to work on and what we've done right, what we've done wrong. And it's a difficult process, but I find it a yearly thing. I don't think it's just, maybe we feel it's more important at this time because we'll be standing before God. I think it intensifies the process.
Yeah, I think that's great, Roger, that the whole point is that, even if you don't end up with quite the clarity that you might be hoping for, as long as you start the process, as long as you begin to do the work, that's what's really important. And that moves right into the beginning of this chapter, which there's four Torah portions that the chapter talks about, because it moves along with the four Torah portions that are in the month of Elul. And the first one is Re'eh, which was a couple of weeks ago, right? Because we're now in the middle of Elul, inching closer and closer to Rosh Hashanah as we speak. And this parsha literally begins with look. So the first parsha in the month of Elul starts with look. And I think that is in and of itself really beautiful, that there is this concept that we can't even start to do the work, and we can't even start to think about the things that we need to do if we don't look first, if we don't actually try to see it. And the second, as soon as the parsha opens, it starts with look, and it continues with, I put before you on this day a blessing and a curse. And the idea is that in every moment we could see the potential for a blessing and the potential for a curse, that everything depends on seeing it with clear eyes and seeing the potential for the blessing in every moment and choosing the blessing over choosing the curse. So what could that possibly mean? And as I was reading this, I was thinking that to myself. It sounds like, oh, there's two mountains, choose the one with the blessings. But what is that? Does anyone have any ideas of what that can mean, to choose the blessing, to choose to be a blessing, to choose the blessing in a situation, or to choose, right, so to choose life, essentially, in the case of what it ultimately means to choose blessings. Yeah, Gail, I saw you had your hand up.
The first thing that comes to my mind, can you hear me? Yeah. Is the Surfside incident. God forbid, if I were in that building, I would be like, oh gosh, this is major curse. But yet I got out of the building and I'm alive. So in a way, that's one way to look at that. I'm blessed. I'm able to survive. And of course, you can keep thinking about the terribleness of the whole thing, but yet you need to keep reminding yourself that you are alive and you have purpose and must go on, or hopefully wants to go on.
There's
Rabbi,
situations where that is relevant. Absolutely. Yes, Mark, and then Aliva.
I just wanted to say that Re'eh, and there are other places where we see it also, let us know that we have a choice, indeed, that we're not pawns. Many people today say, well, choice is an illusion. You don't really have it. You're being manipulated. But there is a choice as to how you want to live your life. Circumstances may make it more difficult, but you can make positive choices, and they do require consciousness. They require alertness. They require you to be awake and not just to slide through life. And I think that's an important thing to remember, not only during Elul, but during the rest of the year, that you have to keep your eyes and ears open and see what's happening and how it affects you and how you can affect your circumstances, and try to do something positive and thus choose life.
And the choice isn't always obvious. The choice isn't always evident, which is why it says Re'eh first before it says to choose, because it's not always going to be like as easy as choose this or that, but sometimes we have to really look into the situation to see. And sometimes, like with the example of the Surfside tower that Gail mentioned, like sometimes it can be very, very, very difficult to see how to choose life in that situation after tragedy. But the first commandment is to look first, to see that in every situation, and that's what this chapter says, that in every situation there is possibility for blessing and there is potential for curse. Oliva?
No, I just wanted to say that that's it. That is exactly what happened with our family, and that my mother-in-law was rescued from the Champlain Towers. And thank God, basically, we all feel that same way, that she was taken down in a cherry picker. And, like, it's easy to just say, oh, everything was lost. But we are all so grateful to God, that she has her life, and, the other things are material. And that's what you have to focus on, that everything else can be replaced, but you can't replace a person.
Marilyn and then Fred.
Okay. To my mind was when back in March in 2020, when I'm a yoga teacher, and when all of our classes got shut down, and then we couldn't see people, and I am also a massage therapist, so that all went away. And initially it just felt like a horrible curse. But then what came out of that was this whole Zoom platform, and we were all able to work the entire year teaching on Zoom. So that was the part of the blessing, and we're still on Zoom with most of the classes. I have one class that I'm seeing in person now. And the other thing also related to my practice, I have a teacher that I usually see twice a year. And as a result of the COVID, I've seen him every day. He's been giving classes every day for a year. And it's made such an incredible difference in my practice, which has just been like the most amazing blessing. And then all the time that I had at home, I just thought to myself, well, how am I going to use this time creatively? And how am I going to find some resilience in myself to deal with this mess here? So I wound up painting my kitchen and painting my bedroom and buying new stuff for the house and cleaning my closets and doing a lot of things that I probably, if I was out working every day, I more than likely wouldn't have done that this year. And then connecting with people that I haven't talked to in a long time, just trying to find out if everybody was okay. And, fortunately, none of my family members got sick. But so that's how I tried to find the blessing in all this.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful. Fred and then Allison.
I think this has a lot to do with interpersonal relationships, and especially to those who mean the most to us, and whether we are not conscious of things that we're actually doing that are disturbing to people who love us and we love. And this takes a great deal of introspection.
Absolutely.
I kind of, in response to Marilyn's comments, I don't want anyone to feel like they've wasted their time if they didn't accomplish great things or become better at their various craftsmanship or practice or careers. In the last year, or so, I've spent a lot of time talking to loved ones, reading books, recoiling into myself, napping. All of that, though, is rejuvenating as well and can be viewed as its own form of blessing. So while it may not on its face look like achievement or accomplishment, it still can be quite lovely. So just want to throw that out.
And that's also really important work. I mean, that's important work for introspection, and it sets you up in a great way for Elul, I would imagine, as well as a great way to continue to foster the relationships with your loved ones. I think that there's that's not a small thing to do. So thank you. Anita?
I looked at it in another context as well. I looked at it as look before you speak, because your words can either be a blessing or a curse, and how you speak to somebody and how they interpret it can help decide whether your words were hurtful or whether your words were helpful. And I think that that's another way of looking at this message.
Right. I think that the idea of choosing to see something in a situation is one way to look at it. And what you're saying is also really important, that essentially in every situation you can look and, kind of stop and decide if you're going to be a blessing in that moment. And if you're going to be a blessing with your words or your actions or whatever that may be, versus the alternate, which is, are you going to be a curse? And that's obviously a difficult thing to swallow. And what I really appreciated with what he had said, I'm gonna point this out. So he mentions the idea of prayer, that the Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah, which is actually reflexive, doing something onto yourself, which I always thought was really interesting, because you think that prayer is like asking for God, but really it's like this internal, something that we're doing internally, something that is supposed to change us. And I think it's Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs that says that type of prayer and the practice of prayer is like water that hits a rock in the same place every single day, just like one drop of water each day. Now, it might not feel like it's going to have that great of an effect, but one drop of water each day over many years, we understand has the power to totally change the formation of the rock. So I always think about that when I'm thinking about the time of year, that it's, while we have this focus in Elul, we're really supposed to bring this consciousness into the year with us. We're really supposed to take what we learn in this moment about ourselves and really weave it into everything we do for the rest of the year. So to choose to be a blessing and to be a curse, it's not, or to, God forbid, be a curse. It's not just something that we're going to be doing for Elul, but it's something that we're going to be taking, the tools that we're going to be taking with us. And I'm going to share the screen right now to just read this portion of the text here. 68.
Yes, all right.
Yes. So I'm going to be beginning with about 2/3 down the bottom of the 68. So I have either meditated. I've either meditated or prayed every day for the better part of the last 30 years. There have been a few occasions during this time when I've done something I knew to be wrong at the time I did it. These times, for most of us, are rather rare. Most of the time, the negative, destructive things we do are done unconsciously. The remedy for this, of course, is simply to become more conscious, more aware. But what about those rare times when consciousness is not the problem? What about the times when we are perfectly conscious to begin with, when we say to ourselves, I know this is wrong. I know this is going to be hurtful and destructive, both to myself and to others, but damn it, I'm going to do it anyway. And performing such a deed, after performing such a deed, it is possible to go through much of one's life in denial or to construct elaborate justification for why you did it. but it is impossible to employ such strategies while standing before God. Then the naked truth of what we have done cannot be denied, and all of our justifications crumble to dust. Standing before God, we see ourselves whether or not we want to, whether we want to or not. Any thoughts about, I think that this goes along with the idea of choosing to be a blessing or to be a curse at any moment in time. Does anyone have any thoughts about this really kind of tough topic to look at, the times when we do something knowing that it's wrong?
Well, it's really a humbling process, and I guess I'd speak for myself as an individual, but also a guy, that we sometimes don't do the kind of introspection, or I'd say I don't, that my wife Karen does. So kind of facing that up front is something that I'm focused on, particularly this Elul. Because the reality is I do a lot of things every day that, that miss the mark. And as Anita said, words really are powerful. And, and for me, really thinking about what I say, as Anita mentioned, is a big focus for this year.
Thank you for sharing. Anita, I see your hand is raised. I'm not sure if it's from the last time or no. Last time. Okay, just making sure before we move on. There's also something that I find that in this section and in this second section, so he talks about prayer and then goes on to the idea of meditation, and essentially what comes from both of them is something that I find really interesting. So the personal and private prayer, where you're praying the words, I've always found it frustrating when I can't concentrate, and I'm trying to concentrate on what it is that the words are saying, and I have a hard time concentrating. Or in the exact same way, if I'm meditating, I've been using a meditation app, which I'm happy to share about because it's been a really interesting tool this month. I'm not a natural meditator. It's not something that I've never been in a meditation class. I just assumed that I wasn't going to be good at it because my attention span is short and I don't have the kind of patience because I feel like I got frustrated with myself that I'm not doing it right, because my mind is wandering all the time. And, I'm thinking about something, and then I all of a sudden realize, oh no, I'm supposed to be meditating. That's the whole point of this time. And the same with prayer, and they're so similar. And what I really liked about what this chapter brought to the surface was that that's actually where we learn the most about ourselves, when we catch ourselves in the drift, when our minds start to drift, and then we're aware about what it is that we're thinking about in those moments. Those are like almost a way to lift the shade to our unconscious mind, to things that we're thinking about, where we don't even notice that we're thinking about them, and that refocusing on the words. And if we can catch what it is we are thinking about as we refocus on the words, whether it's prayer or meditation or both in one, that we can actually then think about what it is that is happening in this under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone ever experienced that, or does anyone have any thoughts on that? Jody? You're on mute. Oh no, you're on mute. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. I would say probably at the end of Yom Kippur, at the the last service, the afternoon service, when you haven't eaten all day, fasting, and you're praying, trying to listen to the rabbis, but your mind is just pretty clear and your thoughts are there and the coming year. And I think that's the time, what you're saying and what the rabbi said, is when you're just trying to pray, but other thoughts are coming in and your mind just seems to be really clear.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that?
I do. Hi, Rabbi Loiben. Hi, Joanne. So I think it's very interesting for any of us who've attempted to meditate, like you said, the potential Western meditation coming from an Eastern philosophy is that we're supposed to be in this blank state time, right? Nothing is to cross our minds if you get to a really heightened level of an ability to do that. And I found that it was very soothing to read these words and to hear these words, that when the other traffic crosses our mind at these moments, that it's not, hey, go away, I'm in the middle of something. It's, this is something important that's come up. Maybe it's writing it down in a journal or integrating it into your heart. But that it's almost like if there was a set of guidelines that at least I've heard or been taught, this added a new line into the opportunity of quote meditation or prayer, and that it is such an amazing moment that we're providing ourselves, and to not penalize oneself if it's not a clear slate, that that's what is to come up, and then the next drop will happen, like you were talking about.
Thank you. Patty, and then Allison.
Hi, everyone. Alana, that was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so happy you're meditating, Rabbi Loiben. Yay! Well, I just wanted to segue on something Alana said about the meditation and your experience, and the book as well. I think that gentleness that Alana's talking about, that kind of just knowing that what the mind does is it strays. When we're saying a communal prayer, like he mentions here a couple of times, thoughts will come in, we'll be distracted, but our focus comes back naturally, I think. My experience has been, comes back, especially, it's been a long time since I've actually been with you all live, but I hope it's back, right? And I think just that gentleness coming back constantly, that gesture of coming back is that drop that Alana's talking about. I just want to stress that gentleness as someone who's been meditating for 30 years. It allows us to be, I think, in the presence of God, to just bring that back. Like a gentle parent, just bringing that child, right? It's okay, just come back here. That's okay, honey, and just putting that out to everybody who attempts that or who feels distracted when meditating, that is our human mind. It is monkey brain, like they say, but I think the beauty of that during this time of preparation is that it may allow for these moments of awareness that give us the choice that everyone's been talking about. Everyone's been talking about that, the choice to act as the blessing, to frame it as a blessing. We need a space, we need a practice, we need a position of prayer. I love this chapter because he really points to things like that. And I just wanted to add one more thing, and I'll stop chatting away, is when he's giving the example of the window where he's with his son. I'm just going to leave it there because I want to know what everyone thought about that beautiful experience about the window as a means to look through. The window has something to look at. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's beautiful. I also loved the window piece. So I'm curious to hear what other people had to say about that as well. Allison, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I was basically just going to plus one what everyone else is saying and add. I think at least a couple of us attend Marta's guided meditation sessions, but they are wonderful. And I personally was taught, like in college when I first took up meditation, that you should push away your thoughts, identify them and push them away. And I told her that I was struggling with one, and she was like, well, just sit with it. Just use that. It was like revolutionary for me. It was like, oh my gosh, that completely changes how I approach this practice. And I wonder how the same thing, if applied to, like, I don't know, Elul preparations, if I just sat with my regrets and kind of like chiding myself over everything that I've done wrong. And instead of going, oh, I've got to make it go away, I've got to, like beg forgiveness for all these things, but maybe just tried sitting with it and staring at it for a few minutes, what that might do for me. So thank you all for this conversation.
And that's the third thing he says about Re'eh is that you need to focus. It's best to focus on one thing, that sometimes to choose what's right in front of your face. Like, what is it? What is that one thought? What is that one thing that keeps coming up? I know personally there's something that I've noticed, like some feedback in a few ways where I'm like, oh, that's been repeated a few times. Like, that's something to like sit with this month and to really focus on. And if that's an external thought, an external situation or an internal thought, if you find yourself every day, if like there's one thing that continues to appear, as much as for me, I might think I'm going to stop thinking about that, compartmentalize that and think about something else instead, to face that thing throughout the month and in the high holiday season. So we're going to move to the second Parsha. I know we're only getting the second Parsha when we're 40 minutes in, so let's see what we can do about finishing all four. But the second Parsha is Shoftim. And this is, I think, I've always thought this is a really interesting Parsha. I love what he does with it, but I think that it's so, as I'm kind of listening to everyone, I think there's such a fine line between Shoftim, like the judge. Shoftim means judges, and also like to heat palel, to pray is like to judge yourself, and this, like the judgment day of Yom Kippur, like the idea comes up a lot. The theme is definitely one of the main themes of the holidays, and I just think that it's so important to have this healthy balance of judgment, that it would be so easy to look at everything that we might, all those like cringeworthy moments is like the best way I can think of to say it right now, that have come up and either our personalities or things that we've done throughout the year, like those like real cringeworthy moments. But that I don't think that this chapter or that the season is really meant to become like so judgmental that it's not healthy. I think that there's also this this gentleness that Patty was talking about, that it's not, that the idea is that we have this moment because we have this whole season every single year because we're human. Because if we were meant to fix everything and then just automatically be like the best people we could be for the next year, we wouldn't need Yom Kippur to come back. So the idea that we really do, we all have things that we can think about and judge ourselves in ways that are kind of nasty and unhealthy. And that this season isn't for that. The season isn't for that self like denigration, but instead it's for the elevation of the soul, to make sure that whatever it is that we're doing, whatever it is that we're seeing, come up, that we can just find ways to gently guide ourselves back to, I like to think about, I don't really love the English word sin so much, but that I like that the Hebrew idea of chet is that we just miss the mark, that it's like a bullseye, that you're never going to hit the bullseye every single time, that instead you just pick up the dart and throw it toward the dartboard again. And sometimes we miss it by like just one of those little rings. And sometimes we're not even anywhere near the board, right? There's so many different ways to miss the mark, and that we can really somehow, if we can refocus ourselves to gently guiding, how can we reposition ourselves in that game of darts so that we get closer to the bullseye next time? What is it about what we're doing that is making it so that the dart's flying backwards, let's just say, like, or like if the dart's, near the bullseye, but not quite there yet, how can we pick back up and try again in a way that it's not supposed to be, we are bad. Judaism does not teach us, we are bad people, we have sinned. It's, how can we do this better next time? How can we pick back up and do this better? How can we be better about this one thing or these things in the coming year? And that's kind of, Elul kind of gives us the tools to look at the moments. But also, like, part of what it's about in sitting with this judgment is judging our stance in the situation. Okay, like, where were we in that moment? How can we move to be different people? How can we elevate instead of denigrate? And I'm going to show us one text from this Shoftim that I really think is important. One text from the chapter on Shoftim, which is on page 77, if anyone is following along at home. But I'm going to share the screen in just one second. So here is, I'm starting on the page 77, the first actual paragraph beginning Parshat Shoftim. Parshat Shoftim, which we read during the first or second week of the month of Elul, begins with what seems like a simple prescription for the establishment of a judicial system. Judges and officers you shall appoint for yourselves in all your gates. But the great Hasidic Torah commentary, the Iturei Torah, read this passage as an imperative of a very different sort, an imperative for a kind of inner mindfulness. According to the Iturei Torah, there are 7 gates, 7 windows to the soul. The 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth. Everything that passes into our consciousness must enter through one of those gates. So at the deepest level, the passage cited above has nothing to do with the establishment of a system of judges and courts, but deals rather with being mindful of the process of consciousness itself. Does anyone have any thoughts about that idea, that the openings in our face are actually the judges at the gates?
Rabbi?
Yes.
It's Mark. Hi. I'm reminded of, I don't know if it's American or English, but an old aphorism: you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. It's sort of old-fashioned common knowledge, but I think it's important. It signals awareness. When you're speaking, you may think that you're sharing wisdom, maybe, but when you're listening, maybe you're learning something. And I did like, I've got it all circled in ink, that whole paragraph about, we're not talking about the gates of the city, and we're not talking about judges. We're talking about interior judges who receive things and analyze them and judge them and internalize them. I think it's a very wise statement and very useful. We should remember it.
Thank you. Roger?
Well, I know in our morning blessings, we're talking about what parts of our body work and what parts of our body don't work. And they're not referring to the eyes. I mean, they're not referring to our senses up top. So except for the mouth and to make sure that our bodily functions are working, because without them, we wouldn't exist. So I'm just surprised that wasn't included in on this commentary.
Well, the idea is that somehow these bodily, like these senses, they're talking about the senses really are judgments, and it's a little bit less so with the lower half of the body, I would imagine, though you could maybe make a comparison. But I can say that after, I guess your stomach does judge things as well, but I was thinking about this specifically because I don't know how many of you are aware, but about a month ago, I caught the Delta variant. And for 3 days of having COVID, I couldn't taste or smell. And I feel very lucky that it was only 3 days, because those were very long days. And I cannot imagine for, one of my cousins still hasn't gotten her taste or smell back, which I just think is very difficult and wild. But it's also interesting. It was interesting in like that I almost felt like there were certain parts of that were potentially dangerous, that we have these senses as like natural judgments. When you smell if food is bad, or when you taste that like something is off, or that something is sour, or whatever it is. It's really I felt like I was disoriented during those days because I couldn't taste or smell. It was like the weirdest feeling. It was also sad that I couldn't taste anything and smell. There's so many things that, I didn't think smell was going to be that big of a deal to me in the end, but it really does like help you navigate in a way. There's like a natural instinct of navigation. Like if you smell smoke, you leave the house. But there's also something about it that things don't feel quite as complete. But I do think that there's a real judgment in that. And then there's a metaphorical judgment in it, but there's also like a very, when I read that, I was specifically taken because I thought about how really important those senses are, that each of the 7 gates are equally important in that way. And it's wild.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I think it was in that chapter, that part of the chapter, when he described with the 2 friends when they were arguing, one was at one side, one was the other, and he was going to settle the argument, and then he realized he was making things worse by not really realizing what was going on and being sensitive to what he felt and trying to be the judge. And so I thought that was really interesting, that he learned you have to listen and you have to not be a judge and actually participate, but analyze and be sensitive to everyone who's involved. And I also thought that now he developed, when he goes to visit people in the hospital, how he stops at the door and he prepares himself not to go in, that he's not going to be judging and solving everything that's going on, that he's there to help, but not necessarily participate, but let the person participate. And you have to be very careful as to what you think you are going to do to the situation, because you may not be prepared at all.
Thank you for sharing. I really enjoyed those 2 parts as well, especially because it's so obvious that this month of Elul we're supposed to be self-reflective and self-judgmental, but hopefully in a positive way. And it's not the time to look at other people and say, oh, just do this or just do that, or and judge the situation for others, or judge, God forbid, someone else as like who they are, right? So this is really the Shov team. We have to be careful that it's to think about the internal self-reflection instead of the external judgment. And if we do catch ourselves in our mind or out loud, which happens to all of us, I would imagine, judging another, that's really just that mirror. That's like that window that becomes like actually just like looking back at your own reflection. Like what is it that I'm struggling with it, or what is it about me, whatever the other person's doing, that's clearly also somehow in some way a reflection of me. But it can be really difficult. I know that it can be really difficult. I was also, I was a chaplain for a summer, and that was the hardest part, was knowing that I'm going to walk into a room and there's actually nothing I can do for them except for be with them. And that is a really big struggle. In fact, I think about it all the time when I call my mom and I tell her a problem, and I just want her to sit with me in that problem and say, that sucks. But instead she's like, well, maybe you could do this, or maybe you can do that. And it's so easy to like, for her to, she just wants to fix everything, right? And thank God she's, it's a very kind natured thing to want to do. And I think we all have those moments of, but I can just help you and fix it instead of you having this problem. But sometimes we really do just need people in our lives to be with us in those moments and not do anything for us. Joni? Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. Who's next?
Joni, and then Anita, and then Alana.
Poetically, very often it's said, eyes are the window to the soul. And that's, people looking into your eyes and seeing who you are inside. And I just love that this was, using your eyes to look at your own soul. It was just a different take on that poetic piece.
I love that. Thank you.
My turn. I also see it as we are the judge of what we want to take in through these gates, what we want to hear, what we want to see, and we have to make the judgment of, are we going to listen to what this person is saying, or are we not going to? Is that what they're saying a blessing or a curse? And also what we see, and then what we say is also, we judge what we're going to say to somebody.
I did not think of it that way, but I love that idea, that we have the ability to judge what it is that we hear and we're thinking and things like that. I think that's really important, and it can be really difficult in certain situations, but it's an important skill to remember that we actually get to have the judgment of what's coming in, that we're like the gatekeepers in all the senses. Thank you. Alana?
Yeah, it's actually building on that. For me, reading this segment with the senses really brought forth the concept of perspective. Basically, through every sense, if we're blessed to have them all working, first of all, there's what is our experience through any of those. And then it's actually a little bit overwhelming, at least for me, when you really realize that that means that there are billions of perspectives for any given moment of what's occurring. And so imagine, most of us are at some point in time probably with, 1 to 5 sets of people in an experience. And, we might imagine, oh, well, I'm with my friends or I'm with my family, and aren't they all seeing something simple that's happening? But in fact, that's, 20 sets of eyes or whatever, it is. And so it's very illuminating to be reminded of what was also just shared by Anita, that like, there's a different perspective potentially happening and likely happening at every single moment, and then multiply that through all those different senses, right? If we're fortunate to have them. And then as you shared, when you're without one of them, it also brings forth probably the illumination of not others who may operate like that all the time without those abilities, but also maybe that we learn at times that different senses get heightened when we lose another one. So, this kind of very raw, but like survival of the fittest, like you're talking about, opportunity to both do internal work to figure out how we can strengthen, or how we must strengthen at some moment in time, our senses and our perspectives, but also how we can change them. Like Anita was saying, to be in the moment of living, or be in the seeing it as a blessing. And just it's pretty wild to realize that we are born with the gifts of what we perceive. And so are the other billions of people. So there's a lot of different perspectives to hold.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I think that it's important to kind of full circle begin with the way that end in a way with the way that we begin, with the way that I began, that I think of this Elul, the shofar, as an alarm clock that is like snoozed, almost like it's being snoozed every day. Like, you know, when you first hear that blast, when you you first hear that first alarm in the morning, and if any of you just like wake up and you jump right out of bed when you hear that first alarm, I would love to hear how you do it. But if you're like me and you are a snoozer, that first alarm is, I'm still very much, asleep, but with every single one, like I'm getting more and more into consciousness, which is why I said about 12. But for the month of Elul, when we have the whole month's worth of alarms, I love that this chapter, which is about the sounding of the shofar, is called "The Horn Blew and I Began to Wake Up," because the idea isn't that we're awake, we're ready for the Rosh Hashanah, let's go. But it's that it really is. It's the beginning of consciousness. It's the beginning of the realization of what's to come, and the idea that we have a lot of work to do in these days. And I'm going to conclude the class with the showing of the blowing of the shofar, the video that we have recorded for Temple Beth Shalom.
Tekiah, Shivari, Rua, Tekiah Gedolah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Bad.
That was good.
That's a fun one,
Very
right?
good. Very good. Very
Thank the creative mind of Adam Traumberg for making this all come to life, and of course, Rabbi Pomerantz for her beautiful.
If we want to find that, it's on we have a YouTube channel or something. You'll excuse me, I'm not very much into YouTube.
I will put the link right now in the chat, but it should be on our website, and it's definitely on YouTube.
I think it's on our Facebook. Like if you go on our Facebook page, maybe.
It should be everywhere.
Yeah.
Hopefully it is everywhere, but it should be if it's not.
It's also on the intro when you watch through Boxcart. It's at the services. It introduces him. So
yeah.
That's good.
Okay, well, I've got it.
High holiday card to all of you, hoping that you all have a season of introspection and hopefully blessing in this holiday season and the year to come. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.